supreme leader, kind of accusing him of being supreme leader. But in practice, the consensus is he will pursue the same agenda as his father, maybe even more hardline, which is in line with the makeup of the Assembly of Experts, who are mostly very hardline clerics.
Do you think we might, I mean, I know it's very difficult for you to say, when might we get this final decision? Could it be today or could it be days away, do you think?
There hasn't been any official... I mean, the rumours are that it could be imminent, but frankly, we don't know, because the Assembly cannot meet in person. And, you know, during the time of war, maybe the rules don't apply.
All right, we'll see what happens. Berang Hejdin from BBC Persian, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, we can also speak now to Rowena Abdul Razak, who's a lecturer in Middle East history at SOAS University of London. Thanks for being with us. Well, whoever is the next supreme leader is going to really affect the course of this war in Iran, obviously.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, of course. I mean, at this point, it's very hard to sort of say who it's going to be, but it does seem that a hardline candidate is most probably going to move forward. And as we can see how the war is progressing, it doesn't seem like like Iran is going to necessarily stop retaliating, despite Araghchi's apology to the Gulf countries, Pezeshkian's previous statements that it's not going to retaliate unless it has been attacked as well. So we're probably going to see a more hardline approach moving forward.
And it's hard to see any new supreme leader that Israel and the United States would actually approve of and think they can do business with.
Yes, it does seem so. Trump has already said he doesn't want Mojtaba Khamenei, and that he does want to have a say on who the next leader will be. And he's also said that he wants an Iran that will, you know, surrender unconditionally, and that's not going to be very likely. Israel has also said that it will target any candidate or any supreme leader that's elected next. So we're very much stuck in between a hard and a rock place.
We're more than
a hard place and a rock, I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. We're more than a week into the war now. I mean, how do you assess what is happening with this conflict and you know, what America and Israel's war aims actually are? Has that crystallised, and has how long a sort of time frame for this war crystallised either?
It's very hard to say. I mean, we're just thinking back to what happened last year in the summer when the US attacked Iran. Iran retaliated by attacking the US base in Qatar. It was very short, quick. But we don't see this happening now. We see Iran has actually expanded the war to include other Gulf countries. And Gulf countries themselves, you know, so far they haven't said that they're going to retaliate and that they're going to most probably rely on the US to strike back at Iran. But at the same time, it's hard to say. They may also have to retaliate as a way to show force against what's happened to their countries. So it's very hard to put a timeline on it. Trump has said it might last for months. It also depends on whether Iran might back down. I mean, the war has sort of revealed the power struggle that is happening in Iran. Those who want to continue the conflict, those who want to go back to the negotiating table. And as we can see, this reflects Iran's long-term struggle between hardliners, reformists, moderates, and so on. So, but if we do see someone like Mojtaba taking the lead to become the supreme leader, we're probably going to see a hardline approach continuing.
And a hardline approach, I mean, some people have said all the Iranian regime really needs to do is to survive, just to sort of stay on in power, to cling to power, however much punishment the country takes, however many airstrikes it suffers.
That's right. And the war has, in fact, consolidated this approach because it on one hand, it has to show a strong hand that it is retaliating. But on the other, it's causing a lot of suffering and so on. And ultimately, if they don't reach a nuclear deal, which is, which was at the heart of the conflict to begin with, and if sanctions continue, Iran has no choice but to keep on going down this path.
OK, Rowena, thank you very much indeed. That's Rowena Abdul Razak, lecturer in Middle East history at SOAS University in London. So what is the picture across the whole region now? Well, those nations that have been caught up in this, some of whom have previously been friendly with Iran, have been, as Rowena was just telling us, have been attacked by Iran, including Saudi Arabia. Our correspondent Samir Hashmi is in Riyadh, and he gave me this update.
Iran continued with their attacks across the region overnight. The Riyadh Defense Ministry said that they intercepted 4 missiles that were targeted towards Riyadh, including one towards the diplomatic quarters, which is the enclave where all the embassies are located, but they all were shot down according to the statement that was issued by them. But we also saw and heard from Bahrain, where 3 people were injured in the early hours today on a university campus, and a water desalination plant was attacked. Kuwait overnight was attacked. One residential building was attacked, which was engulfed in fire. 2 Kuwaiti personnel lost their lives. And yesterday in Dubai, we saw multiple attacks through the day, including on Dubai Airport in the morning, on a tall residential building in Dubai Marina, which is an upscale area. And one person actually died in a different locality, a Pakistani national, because of the debris falling on him. So, yeah, the attacks have continued on this region even overnight.
And what are the Saudi authorities saying about the war in general? What's been their reaction to the fighting and the conflict so far?
I mean, if you look at all the public statements that have come down from the Foreign Affairs Ministry, they've condemned the attack from the Iranians. And this has pretty much been the consistent line across the Gulf states, because they are angry with Iran, because their argument is that they haven't allowed the Americans to use their military bases located in the Gulf or use their territory for any attack. So they are caught really in this crossfire between Iran and the Israelis along with the Americans. So they have said that they have the right to respond. So far, we haven't seen them getting involved in this war directly. I know from my sources that the Saudis have been involved in back-channel talks with the Iranians to try to arrive at some kind of understanding or to stop this war, or at least stop the attacks on the Gulf nations. But so far, there hasn't been any success. So this has really left the Gulf nations really frustrated, because they feel they've been the soft targets in this war, which was not theirs from the word go.
And we did hear from the Iranian president, who initially seemed to say that Iran wouldn't carry out any more attacks on neighbouring Gulf states like Kuwait, like the UAE, like Saudi Arabia, if they didn't attack Iran. But then now he's saying those comments have been misconstrued. So it's not really clear what the Iranians are saying.
Yeah, you're right, Ben. Actually, when
people were injured during an Iranian missile attack there. We're going to go to Mohammed Jamjoom, who is here for us in Doha. And the death toll in the Gulf from Iranian strikes has risen, with the UAE Defense Ministry confirming one more death there.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. And let's talk first about the attacks that were launched by Iran on the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, today. There was a statement that was issued just a short while ago from the UAE's Ministry of Defense, and it says that today 17 ballistic missiles were launched from Iran. They were detected by the air defenses in the UAE, that 16 ballistic missiles were destroyed, that one fell into the sea, that 117 drones were detected, that 113 of those drones were intercepted, and that 4 of them fell within the country's territory. Beyond that, you mentioned how the death toll has risen. The UAE Ministry of Defense says that 4 deaths overall since the start of attacks launched by Iran towards the UAE, that those comprise citizens of Pakistan, Nepal, and Bangladesh. Also, since this all began, the UAE is reporting that there have been 112 cases of moderate to minor injuries. Let's also talk about a worrying development in Bahrain. The Ministry of Interior stating that in the last several hours, the Bahrainis detected a drone attack that caused material damage to a water desalination plant. A few hours before that, the Bahraini Ministry of Interior had announced that 3 people had been injured when a university building had been struck by falling debris as the result of a missile being intercepted, and that was in the Al Muharraq area of Bahrain. Beyond that, we should also talk about what's been going on in Qatar, of course. The Ministry of Defense issued a statement several hours ago in which they said that Qatar was subjected yesterday, on Saturday, to an attack that involved 10 ballistic missiles and 2 cruise missiles launched from Iran. When you break that down, let's go into what the statement says. It says that the Qatari armed forces successfully intercepted 6 ballistic missiles. 2 ballistic missiles fell in Qatar's territorial waters. 2 ballistic missiles landed in an uninhabited area without causing casualties. And the armed forces also announced that they successfully intercepted 2 cruise missiles. So still a very volatile time here in the region, and you're seeing how much these Gulf neighboring countries of Iran are being impacted by those attacks emanating from Iran. Tom?
Yeah, Mohammed, like you say, it doesn't seem like there's any sign of this threat from Iran de-escalating anytime soon. Can you just talk us through some of the repercussions for these Gulf states? What does it mean, in terms of just trying to get some flights in and out of the country back up and running?
Yeah, well, let's talk specifically about what's happening here in Qatar. Of course, for days now, a civil aviation authority has said that the Qatari airspace remains closed as a result of all that's going on. Now, we know that today there were flights that came in, Qatar Airways flights, emanating mostly from European countries that landed successfully in Qatar. These were limited flights. They were only for passengers returning to Qatar, meaning their final destination was in Qatar. But there was also a statement released from Qatar Airways saying that there were a limited number of flights. These were repatriation flights taking people out of Qatar into a number of European countries. It's also been announced by Qatar Airways that while the airspace remains closed for civilian flights, and that is still the case until there's a further announcement made, that they do expect that there will be flights again emanating from mostly European countries tomorrow, coming to Qatar, incoming flights, bringing people whose final destination is Qatar. That's expected tomorrow as well. But we should also talk about the fact that over the course of the last several days, there have been numerous flights in the region where the airspace still remains closed mostly in these countries. Even countries that have announced limited flights, whether they be repatriation flights or other types of flights, a lot of times those get delayed or canceled altogether because the situation remains volatile, remains fluid. So oftentimes, even in some of these Gulf countries, when it's been announced that there will be a resumption of some limited flights, oftentimes they change course a few hours later and say those have been canceled just because there have been so many strikes emanating from Iran onto these countries. It remains a dangerous and fluid and volatile situation. And so that's one of the reasons there is so much concern. The more this is prolonged, the more it impacts the region, specifically when it comes to tourism, when it comes to aviation. People are very worried at this time, and they're worried that this goes on and how much that's going to cause issues for these countries in the near and possibly long term. Tom?
Indeed. Thank you so much, Mohammed Jamjoom, for us there in Doha. Iran's president says his earlier remarks about halting attacks on friendly countries were misinterpreted. Masoud Pezeshkian says Iran does not have a dispute with its neighbours, but is forced to retaliate against attacks.
The enemy has a distorted understanding of my words. They want us and our neighbouring countries to be at war and are seeking to create discord between us and other nations. If they attempt to invade our territory from any country, we will be compelled to respond to that aggression. However, this response does not imply that we have a conflict or disagreement with that country, nor do we intend to upset its people. We are simply forced to act in defense. The more pressure they exert on us, the stronger our response will be.
I want to bring in our panel of guests. Now in the studio is Zaidun El-Kanani, a Middle East politics lecturer at Georgetown University in Qatar. Al Jazeera correspondent Russell Serda joins us once again, covered this region extensively, obviously. And in Tehran is Hassan Ahmadian, an associate professor at the University of Tehran. Thank you so much for being with us here this hour. Russell, if I can begin with you. We've seen another death here in the Gulf. How significant is that? And if we can just take it a little bit further, what are some of the longer-term consequences as we see more Iranian attacks on the Gulf states, regardless of the messaging that comes out of Tehran?
Well, for the Gulf countries, so it's simply the whole Gulf dream is based on the safety, based on the prosperity, and of course, based on the stability. So, and now we're seeing that actually for decades and decades that these Gulf countries outsourcing their security is now actually backfiring. So we have seen previously, just almost within 12 months, so Israeli attacks, Iranian attacks, and now again Iranian attacks. And so the United States was supposed to actually provide the security umbrella here. And now there are more and more questions whether the U.S. security umbrella is really reliable or not. I think On the societal level, definitely it's causing the anxieties. So, and there are the disruptions. And as we can see, for example, the flights are still quite limited. But the strategic outcome of that, perhaps once this war is over, the Gulf countries are not only going to focus on diversifying their economic trade partners, but also they are going to seriously look for the security partners as well and diversifying that as well. Because we have seen through the last decade, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, they have diversified their trade partners, but still when it comes to security, so the US was the main ally, was the main provider of the security. But as now, the US security umbrella is being questioned, and also in certain extent is becoming even a burden in some cases. So then I think the strategic outcome is going to be for the Gulf countries that they're going to look for some alternatives. That doesn't mean a rupture from the United States, but just to have more alternatives.
To have options. Zayden, we've seen in the last 24 hours the US and Israel target civilian infrastructure in Iran, such as their oil depots and desalination plants. Is there a worry here for Gulf states now that we're going to see retaliation from Iran on civilian infrastructure here, like oil depots or desalination plants?
There's certainly a worry. Iran already targeted civilian areas and targeted natural resources-based areas around the GCC in the early days of this conflict, meaning even when the strategy of the US and Israeli coordinated strikes against Iran, which was perhaps much more simpler than it is today, Iran or the Iranian government found itself rationalizing its attacks in a way against the GCC that would paralyze the economy, or as Rasul mentioned, would paralyze and destroy the image of stability, whether that's economic or political. From a GCC perspective, there is always a diplomacy angle that they're trying to promote for both sides. Continuing this war wouldn't make sense to them economically nor politically. But also there's the issue where how will they sit on the table again in the future with Iran once, after following years of being advocates of stopping any escalation and in the region between the US and Iran. In this case, it will be much more harder to sit on the table in a similar manner that would ensure the safety and prosperity of both sides, given what happened in recent days.
Yeah, hard to keep that relationship going forward. Hassan, can you just give us an idea who is actually in charge in Tehran right now? Who's making these calls to continue targeting GCC countries? Because from the outside, it's really unclear exactly who is making that decision.
Well, it's obvious based on the Constitution, the Supreme Leadership Council is taking the decisions on the part of the leadership. And also the Supreme National Security Council, which has always been the body tasked with strategic decision-making in Iran, is leading those deliberations on how to move forward in this conflict. And another part of the question, I think, from the Iranian perspective, since there's another part to the story, they distinguish between U.S. bases and assets and their neighbors. According to the rhetoric, those bases were used to target Iranian civilian and non-civilian infrastructure. And so just yesterday, the Iranian commander, the spokesman for Iran's armed forces announced that Al-Dhafra air base, for instance, was used to attack a desalination plant in Qishm Island. Before that, they said Al-Dhafra air base itself was used to attack the school that killed 170 school kids. So it's being documented on both sides. I'm sure the GCC will have a lot of blame on Iran. Right. I think the Iranians will have a big file as well after this war.
Yeah, Rasul, can you just talk to us a little bit briefly about the power vacuum that seems to exist in Tehran right now, and what is going to happen in the coming days? We're all waiting for the next Supreme Leader to be announced. Can you talk to us a little bit about why it's taken so long?
I think one of the reasons that it's taken so long because now Iranians are having growing concerns that the decapitation or the killing of the Supreme Leader was not just limited with Ali Khamenei, and it was not just one hit, but Israelis are turning this into a long-term war strategy, and whoever is going to replace the previous Supreme Leader is also going to be assassinated. What I can see here is indeed that Iranians are right having such concerns because Israelis are adopting this strategy. They have done the same with Hamas, with Hezbollah, and now they're treating Iran as an armed group and going after their leaders, not only political leaders or at the supreme leader level, but on daily basis, they're also targeting the military leaders as well. The strategy here is definitely to create a leadership crisis. And I think this leadership crisis is already showing the implications, creating the implications in Iran. Yesterday, we have clearly seen that. The president has apologized and said that there will not be further attacks in the region. And hours later, so the IRGC released a statement actually undermining what he has said. And also the same member of the Interim Leadership Council, Mohsin Ejei, also said that the attacks are going to continue. So we're seeing that there is a growing rift between the political wing, between the religious authorities, and also the armed forces, particularly the IRGC. And this is becoming more and more. We're seeing that there is a power struggle within Iran. And the best answer, perhaps, to that is to come up quickly with a name that to be announced as the supreme leader.
And Zaydoun, just on that, how difficult is it for so many of these Gulf states to try and de-escalate the situation between Iran and whether it's Qatar, the UAE, Saudi, Bahrain, Kuwait, because doesn't seem like there's anyone they know who to go and negotiate with to try and de-escalate the situation. So how difficult is it for leaders here?
It's very difficult in comparison to the preventive de-escalation efforts that they tried to promote even prior to the war. Right now, the escalation has begun. It is no longer limited to what the interest would be in the Gulf region's economic and political stability. Iran is fighting an existential threat. The United States is fighting an existential threat to its global influence, given that if the war ends and the regime stays in the picture, that would be seen as a major defeat to the U.S. attempt in trying to undermine the regional power of Iran today.
Hassan, I just want to come to you. We've got about a minute or so left in this discussion, but obviously there's this thick plume of cloud of smoke. We're hearing about toxic rain there in the capital. Can you just give us a sense of what it is like there? I mean, this is a city that has been under attack for the last 7 or 8 days. So how are the people of Tehran dealing with this latest escalation on civilian infrastructure?
Well, up until yesterday, when the refinery and oil reserves and gas reserves were attacked by the Israelis and Americans, things were, quiet to a large extent. Of course, many of the people left the city, and many have stayed. But now we have targeted infrastructure, including oil refinery, which is basically intoxicating the weather here, and we have toxic rain, as you mentioned last night. And so health ministry is telling people how to deal with this situation. It's not a good situation for the ordinary people. They are basically sitting in their homes trying to wait this out. But I'm not sure to what extent that is possible as well.
No, indeed. Thank you so much. We'll have to leave it there. Hassan, Zaydoun and Ressel, we really do appreciate all your time and your insight. Well, police in Norway say an explosion at the US Embassy in the capital Oslo may be linked to the conflict in the Middle East. Police say the incident happened in the early hours of Sunday at the entrance to the consular section. Officials say the blast caused minor damage and no one was injured. Norway police say they are working closely with the US Embassy. Well, that's all from me, Tom McRae. For the moment, you can find much more information on our website. Inside Story is next, which examines how further could the Iran war spill over. Stay with us.
Just how far will the Iran war spill over? From the Gulf countries to Lebanon, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Cyprus and Sri Lanka, the conflict has been spreading. But what are the dangers of this war expanding even further beyond the Middle East? This is Inside Story. Hello again, I'm James Bays. It's been a week since the war between Israel, the United States and Iran started with strikes on Tehran. The conflict soon spread to neighbouring countries who've been on the receiving end of hundreds of Iranian